Marvel's Ultimate Alliance is one of my favorite games of all time. While I understand many people's problem with the game, such as it having lackluster characters, a weak plot, and unfinished game mechanics, I wholeheartedly denounce the ideas that Ultimate Alliance is a shameless cash grab, an objectively terrible game, or worse than its sequel. This game has heart. It has a decent progression system that encourages experimentation and heavily rewards continued play. Ultimate Alliance is in no way a terrible game, but honestly it is a schlep if you aren't interested in Marvel's world or characters. I understand that many people didn't want to play the game past the Helicarrier because it just didn't grab their attention or interest. I felt the same way about Bloodborne, but just because some players weren't invested enough to finish these games does not mean they are objectively bad. Ultimate Alliance has enough flaws that I'm willing to acknowledge without the inclusion of a handful of YouTubers' vapid arguments. But this isn't a review or critique of the game, it's a tier list video. For those of you who understand the game well enough and don't need a lecture on the fundamentals, skip here for the tier list. Without getting too in-depth with my experience with Ultimate Alliance, I will say that I played the game for the first time when I was around 10. One of my friends and I played it on his Wii and I absolutely loved it. Full disclosure, we used a lot of cheat codes, but had fun nevertheless. Then, I got Ultimate Alliance 2 on my Wii a few years later and settled for it as an alternative to the original. I put many hours into it, but it just wasn't the same. Where Ultimate Alliance 2 improved on game mechanics, it totally lacked the spirit of its predecessor. Then I got a PS4, and upon learning that Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 had been remastered, I bought the bundle and have been mostly playing the first one since 2017. I have put many hours into this game over the course of almost a decade, and I can confidently say that I understand the game well enough to make this tier list reliable. And without further ado, let's get into it. This tier list pertains only to PS4 as there are many console exclusive characters across the ports and all of my judgments are based on my own gameplay experience. The placement of the characters in this tier list are based on how they play individually and in a team composition on the hard difficulty where the characters are at least level 73, no cheats. Ultimate Alliance is full of game mechanics that could make or break your experience and so understanding them is necessary to improving your gameplay and being able to interpret this tier list. Characters are inherently best suited at one of three universal character stats, either body, focus, or striking. Body is the stat that dictates a character's total number of hit points. Focus dictates a character's total energy points, which allow for powers to be performed. And striking dictates how much melee damage a character does. Any character has one of these stats far higher than the others by default, meaning that any given character is best suited for a particular task relevant to their base statistics. Of course, there are other more abstract traits that certain characters possess based on their individual super identity. Wolverine and Deadpool have healing factors. The Human Torch and Iceman are immune to fire and cold damage respectively. The Hulk and Luke Cage have might, allowing them to lift abnormally heavy objects. Iron Man and the Hulk have access to flight instead of a regular double jump, and Spider-Man and Venom swing from webbing instead of a double jump or flight. Combat is an essential part of Ultimate Alliance. While you could complete the entire game just spamming X and occasionally using your extreme attack, this playstyle isn't so viable on the hard difficulty. To make the most of combat in Ultimate Alliance, you need to take into account each of your team members' unique stats and traits, and ideally use them together to make easy work of the enemy forces. After all, why put 4 characters on your team if you're only going to mash X with one of them? Speaking of which, standard melee attacks are performed by pressing X. Heavy melee attacks are performed by pressing circle. Combos are performed by mixing and matching X and circle and are limited to 3 universal combo chains. Each character can trip, stun, or pop up an enemy depending on the combination used. Archaic, but effective. All characters have access to some form of air attack, performed by jumping with triangle and pressing circle, or going into flight mode and pressing X or circle. Powers are performed by combining R2 with a specific face button and cost a percentage of your energy. This might have been unintentional on the part of the devs, but it is possible for any character who can fly to perform their powers mid-flight. While this keeps them out of the range of the reach of enemies' melee attacks, it does mean that they will whiff a large portion of their ranged attacks. During combat, characters will charge their momentum meter. Once full, the momentum can be exchanged for a character's extreme attack, performed by combining R2 and triangle. It is the most devastating power any character has access to that affects all enemies on screen. While certain extreme attack animations seem as though they couldn't possibly affect all on-screen enemies, they most often do. Momentum is filled instantly by picking up extreme pips, but alternatively is gained fastest by dealing melee damage. So, characters with high striking will get their momentum meter filled the quickest. If you're playing a character with a great extreme attack but very weak melee damage, you can change that by picking up striking upgrades and potentially upgrading their costume-specific traits. Just remember that activating one character's extreme will cause all teammates with full momentum to initiate their extremes as well. Pressing square near an enemy will initiate a grab. If an enemy is armed with a melee weapon, square will instead allow you to take that weapon from the enemy. If you're successful in your button mashing, the weapon's durability meter will replace your character's energy meter, and you won't be able to perform powers as long as you're holding the melee weapon. After After having grabbed an enemy, you can move the left stick in order to throw them to the ground or off a ledge. Alternatively, you could mash X to punch them repeatedly while they're helpless. But what many people either overlook or miss completely is what happens when you grab an enemy and press circle. From the grab position, every character will, upon pressing circle, perform a takedown. Takedowns are character specific, with a minority of characters sharing animations for them. Some takedowns are cool to look at, some are useful to combat, and some are totally pointless. Gear and outfits play important roles as well. Gear can be found in chests scattered throughout the story or can be taken from defeated bosses. Gear provides individual characters with upgrades to stats or powers and can be sold for a quick buck. While gear definitely has its merits, even on hard difficulty, I always choose to sell the gear I find and use those points to upgrade costume-specific traits instead. Speaking of which, every character comes equipped with 4 costumes, except Moon Knight for whatever reason. Costumes play a far more important role than any cosmetic item found in today's games. Costumes are unlocked by getting kills with each character and completing their comic book missions. Since DLC characters don't have any comic book missions, just get more kills with them. Defense is the stat that reduces damage taken and can only be upgraded with coins. If the defense stat on one of Spider-Man's costumes is maxed out, then he will have max defense while wearing that costume. But if you change his costume to one with no points spent in defense, then the defense stat will revert back to 0. This is a strange game mechanic, but I'm used to it at this point. Because costume-specific traits have a direct impact on gameplay, certain costumes are far more viable than others. Meaning that if you want to use Spidey's symbiote costume but you want the traits of his Scarlet Spider costume, you're just gonna have to bite the bullet. But thankfully, no costume is definitively terrible. Some costumes are just so much better than others that there's no point using the lesser ones. I classify a particular character's costumes as either good or viable. Viable means that the costumes are most effective when combined with specific powers, meaning that if you don't have the right powers equipped, you shouldn't be wearing that costume. An outfit is good when it benefits the character regardless of what powers they have assigned at any given time. For example, Thor has 4 viable outfits. These outfits are viable because whichever one you have equipped dictates what powers you'll use, and vice versa. You wouldn't want to wear his ultimate costume, which increases hammer damage, and then equip elemental powers for him. There are other outfits which will benefit those. I categorize characters into 2 groups, brawlers and zoners. A brawler is a character who uses up-close weapon or melee attacks to get the job done, while zoners are better suited doing damage with ranged attacks. The type of characters you include in your team directly dictates your most viable playstyle. A team comprised of Iron Man, Deadpool, Silver Surfer, and Cyclops would be best suited to use their ranged powers and keep enemies at a distance. A team comprised of Wolverine, Captain America, Thor, and Hulk would be best suited to get up in the enemy's face, mash X, and maximize their extreme attack usage. These teams are essentially polar opposites, and so finding a balance of brawlers and zoners in your composition would ensure the most balanced experience. An example of a well-balanced team would be something like Wolverine, Iron Man, Elektra, and Ghost Rider. On this team, Wolverine is the resident brawler, Iron Man has flight and might, Elektra can buff the whole team's damage, and Ghost Rider, in his original costume, could revive any dead teammates. Throughout the story, this team will only get stronger and more viable as the characters level up, unlock new powers and costumes, and improve their stats. Have you ever encountered a body, focus, or striking upgrade and thought, hey, an upgrade, I should give it to my main/most played character? If that has been your mentality, then I'm afraid you're wasting your team's potential. Take the well-balanced team I mentioned before. Inspect their traits and stats and tell me that it would be a good idea to give body upgrades to Iron Man. Tell me how it would help your team overall for Wolverine to get increased focus. Again, to make the most of Ultimate Alliance, you must consider characters' unique traits and stats, and form compositions that make the most of characters' differences. Throughout the story, the player is given no shortage of body, focus, and striking upgrades. In the team example I gave before, you would make the most of the composition by giving striking upgrades to Wolverine and Elektra, focus upgrades to Iron Man, and by spending your coins on the character's unique costume traits, such as original Ghost Rider's Resurrect Ally trait. This information might not seem necessary to a tier list, but understanding Ultimate Alliance's fundamental mechanics is absolutely necessary to be able to make the most of your gameplay experience. The information that I have so far shared is not abundantly clear to new players and took me many hours of gameplay to fully grasp. With that said, let me preemptively address those with grievances of this tier list. Ultimate Alliance is a game with many possible playstyles made available for players. The amount of viable playstyles shrinks as the difficulty increases. If you are playing the game on hard, you have to play to win. This means that certain characters are simply not viable in high-level play. That is not to say that you shouldn't play them or that you can't enjoy using them. If you play Ultimate Alliance at all, I'm happy for you. This game's fanbase is too small as it is. I don't mean to alienate players. With this video, I hope to bring more attention to the game. But I've spent many hours playing this game for this video, and I intend to make the tier list objective and well-founded. We'll start from the bottom and make our way up. The list starts at tier C. Ms. Marvel, Doctor Doom, Blade, and Spider-Woman. These characters fall into C tier because of how little they have going for them. Some of these characters seem to have been afterthoughts of the developers because of how ineffective they are and because of how much potential was wasted with regards to their character design. These characters aren't completely useless, but they're in C tier because of how viable they aren't in comparison to other characters. Ms. Marvel is a focus character with 4 viable outfits, 1 good power, an okay takedown, and an adequate extreme. Ms. Marvel seems to have been designed with zoning in mind, but her ranged powers are so pathetic that I'd advise using her as a brawler instead. Equip her classic outfit, which grants benefits to striking, activate her photon orb power, and go to town on that X button. This playstyle will quickly build momentum and allow Ms. Marvel to stun all enemies around her. Blade is a striking character with 2 good outfits, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. Blade's saving grace is his 1 good power, a move that stuns all enemies around him, allowing for follow-up attacks. He remains in C tier because even his 1 good power, Flash Bomb, reduces his damage while the enemies are stunned. The more you upgrade the power, the longer the stun lasts and the less damage you do. Spider-Woman is a body character with 3 viable outfits, 1 good power, a pointless takedown, and a poor extreme. Spider-Woman is best utilized by increasing her striking stat in whatever way possible. During combat, web enemies to the ground and mash X while they can't do anything about it. Doctor Doom is a body character with 4 viable outfits, 2 good powers, a useless grab, and an okay extreme. Doom is a mess of a character because he doesn't really excel at anything. Your best bet with him is to activate his shield and then either spam his detonation power or spam X for the extreme. It goes without saying that if you're looking to make a team of the worst characters in the game, the entirety of C tier has got you covered. Using these characters is sure to result in lackluster gameplay if not outright failure. However, this team does have a viable playstyle. They're just in C tier because the other characters in the game have better tools and options. Using the C tier team effectively would mean webbing enemies to the ground with Spider-Woman or stunning them with Blade, and then letting Doom and Ms. Marvel come in to dish out the damage. B tier. These characters are viable at the very least. They have enough redeeming qualities to keep them out of C tier, but not enough merits to allow them into A tier. B tier includes Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, Daredevil, Luke Cage, Storm, Invisible Woman, The Human Torch, Colossus, Black Panther, Thor, Cyclops, Thing, Venom, and Nick Fury. The worst of this bunch are easily Colossus, Thing, Venom, and Luke Cage. Colossus is a body character with 4 viable outfits, 3 viable powers, a good grab, and a good extreme. Colossus excels at doing radial damage, but beyond that he's pretty basic. Luke Cage is a striking character with 3 good outfits, 2 good powers, an okay takedown, and an adequate extreme. Much like Colossus, Cage is tasked with dealing radial damage to crowds of enemies. Unlike Colossus, Cage has decent melee potential and should always be working towards the next extreme attack. The Thing is a striking character with 3 good outfits, 4 good powers, an excellent takedown, and an okay extreme. Thing has a useful GTFOM move but is best utilized by stun-locking enemies with his hand clap and then using his takedown to thin out crowds of enemies until his extreme charges up. Rinse and repeat. Venom is a body character with 2 good outfits, 1 good power, a flashy takedown, and an extreme that freezes enemies in place for a time. Venom's job is to use his symbiote flail to damage enemies from range and stun them with his extreme for the rest of the team to take care of. A natural support character. At this point you might be asking, but Lumo, some of these characters seem like they belong in C tier, and some of the C tier characters seem better than some of these. What's up? And the answer to that is that while a specific character in B tier might have fewer viable outfits and or powers than characters in C tier, that specific character is in a higher tier because what they do have at their disposal is more effective in combat than the multiple mediocre tools the lower tier characters might have. And that rule applies to the higher tiers as well. Moving on. Ghost Rider is a body character with 2 viable outfits, 3 good powers, a useful takedown, and an okay extreme. Ghost Rider should be played in one of 2 ways, either wearing his classic costume to maximize damage with his Hellfire attacks, or wearing his original costume to gain access to higher chain attack damage and his Resurrect ally trait. Regardless of which one you choose, Ghost Rider's best powers are his Penance Stare debuff, Chain Flechette, and Damnation. Black Panther is a striking character with 3 good outfits, 2 okay powers, a cool looking takedown, and a good extreme. With Black Panther, you want to increase his striking, focus, and power damage for the best experience. His Razor Cyclone power is his best tool to take on hordes of enemies, and you'll make quick work of them with your melee and extreme attacks if your energy runs out too soon. Using Black Panther with his modern outfit equipped will mean you get your extreme far more frequently, as this outfit comes with the Reflect damage trait. This trait reflects enemies' melee damage back at them, and because melee damage charges your extreme the fastest, the more you get hit by enemies, the more you'll be able to use your extreme. Storm is a focus character with 2 viable outfits, 4 acceptable powers, a lame takedown, and an extreme that keeps enemies electrocuted for a time. Your best chance of success with her lies in her whirlwind power. Stand in the middle of a crowd of enemies and rotate your left stick until the enemies are gone or until your energy meter runs out. Chain lightning stun locks enemies and slowly, and I mean very slowly, kills them. Thor is a body character with 4 viable outfits, 4 good powers, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. Depending on which costume he's wearing, Thor will either be dealing electric or hammer damage. Although the outfits advertise elemental damage, they really mean electricity damage. Thor is a hybrid character because you could use his lightning charge to zone or get up close with his hammer attacks. Using Thor as a brawler would be greatly aided by his Godspeed buff. Northwind serves the same purpose as Storm's whirlwind power but does less damage. Invisible Woman is a focus character with 2 good outfits, 1 good power, a lame takedown, and an okay extreme. Invisible Woman is the only character in the game who can rapidly place enemies into traps that deal damage over time. Her extreme stuns all enemies in proximity, so increasing her striking stat would ensure the most effective play. Use Kinetic Snare to trap enemies, go to town on that X button, and then stun enemies with your extreme. Rinse and repeat. Moon Knight is a body character with 3 viable outfits, 4 viable powers, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. Depending on what costume you prefer, you'll either make use of his crescent range powers or his staff and melee attacks. If you're a Moon Knight loyalist, then you'll absolutely want to increase his focus stat as you play. His best power is his nunchuck attack, but the problem is that it uses up so much energy that you can't afford to use it for long. But with increased focus, you'll be able to use the nunchucks far longer and deal torrents of damage. Daredevil is a striking character with 3 good outfits, 5 viable powers, a stylish takedown, and an extreme that trips all enemies in range. Daredevil is a brawler who is best used by mashing X and tripping enemies. His mobility is great and he even has access to a damage buff. It's the weakest damage buff in the game, but it's there. The Human Torch is a focus character with 1 good outfit, 3 good powers, an okay takedown, and an acceptable extreme. Human Torch is pretty versatile. He's best suited for zoning with his fireballs, but his wildfire power allows him to launch enemies a few at a time. If you choose to take one of his lesser costumes, you could make up for the weak fire damage by increasing his melee damage. Nevertheless, he is most effective at a distance. Cyclops is a focus character with 2 good outfits, 2 great powers, a waste of a takedown, and an awkwardly long extreme. Cyclops is the only character in the game who uses zoning as his best and only option for gameplay. Using Cyclops as a brawler is asking for unnecessary deaths and a total waste of potential. Put some distance between you and your enemies, activate Cyclops' beam power buff, and use Ricochet Blast to thin out the crowds. Nick Fury is a focus character with 2 good outfits, 3 good powers, a cool takedown, and an okay extreme. Nick Fury is special because he's essentially an aimbot. His SMG power automatically tracks enemies, allows for prolonged zoning, and is made ever more effective by his high focus. Maximize your damage by increasing the marksman stat on either his stealth or general Fury outfit. Sadly, Fury falls into B tier because of his laughably low damage output. Whereas a character like Deadpool's gunshots do damage per bullet, Fury's SMG does damage per second, making for far less damage overall. On to A tier. These are the go-to characters for the most difficult fights in the game. The A-tier characters have the best powers, traits, and tools to give you the advantage over enemies. A-tier includes Sabretooth, Silver Surfer, Magneto, Doctor Strange, Hulk, Hawkeye, Nightcrawler, Elektra, Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Iceman, and Mr. Fantastic. Sabretooth is a striking character with 4 viable outfits, 3 good powers, an adequate takedown, and a good extreme. Sabretooth is one of the best brawlers in the game. Equip him with focus upgrades for maximum damage output. During combat, use Sabretooth's Berserker Rage buff, and then go to town with his Talon Frenzy power. He makes easy work of large groups of enemies provided he has enough energy points. Alternatively, you could just mash X and always work towards the next extreme, but that would be wasting his Talon Frenzy, one of the best powers in the game for its mobility and damage. Silver Surfer is a focus character with 2 good outfits, 4 good powers, an okay takedown, and an okay extreme. Position yourself in the middle of a crowd of enemies and use Surfer's Rage to easily dispatch them. Surfer is often praised for being the resident healer of Ultimate Alliance, and while this is essentially true, it's not too useful at high-level play. The most viable characters in this game are of such a nature that they never require healing. They either dish out so much damage so quickly that healing is never necessary, or they have enough defenses that healing would be redundant. If you want a healer on your team, Surfer is the way to go, but for the most part, he is a strong character regardless of his healing capabilities. Magneto is a body character with 4 viable outfits, 3 good powers, a lame takedown, and an okay extreme. Magneto is best utilized by spamming his shockwave's power and levitating enemies off the ledges. Magneto is a must-pick for all low-level teams. His dark energy boost increases his teammates' skill and outfit ranks, provided that they have at least 1 point spent in that power or trait. Magneto is most effective in low-level teams because once your characters hit level 73, they are able to max out any specific power. Outfit ranks just require coins, so that's irrelevant. But by the time your team's characters reach level 73, their best powers can be maxed out, making Magneto's buff redundant. Doctor Strange is a focus character with 3 viable outfits, 3 good powers, a very flashy takedown, and an okay extreme. Strange is best played at a distance using his mystic bolts to zone enemy forces. If enemies get too close, Strange can use his mind wipe power to turn them to allies, or spam Faultine Flame to steal away their health. Hulk is a striking character with 4 viable outfits, 3 good powers, a cool grab, and a good extreme. Hulk is undoubtedly the best brute in the game because of the combination of his Fury buff and Hulk's Stomp power. The buff makes him larger, increasing his speed and damage. Hulk's Stomp is a hybrid move that does radial damage as Hulk's foot hits the ground and sends a shockwave forward, making it an effective zoning tool as well. When Fury is active, Hulk's Stomp can be spammed for devastating effects. Hawkeye is a focus character with 3 viable outfits, 4 good powers, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. Hawkeye is the most versatile zoner in the game because of the tools at his disposal. Ice Pick is a radial power that freezes enemies in a radius around him. The recovery on this move is quite slow, but when paired with his teammates' powers, the enemies are totally helpless. Adamantium Arrow is a radial power that hits enemies with flaming arrows, leaving them burning for a time. But Hawkeye's most powerful tool is the one that makes him a zoner in the first place: Paralyzer. By spamming this power, Hawkeye can keep enemies stun-locked indefinitely. Paralyzer might not do high damage, but keeping enemies immobile is a price worth paying. Hawkeye's damage buff makes his attacks all the more potent. Nightcrawler is a body character with 3 good outfits, 2 good powers, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. Nightcrawler's spinning sword power is his best tool to deal with large groups of enemies. Alternatively, you could use his Bamfing Blitz to toy with and defeat one enemy at a time. He's basically a better version of Black Panther. Elektra is a body character with 3 viable outfits, 1 fantastic buff, an okay takedown, and an extreme that leaves enemies stunned long after the animation is complete. Elektra is, for the most part, an extremely underwhelming character. Her saving grace is her inner calm boost that buffs the whole team's damage output. This buff is the whole reason she's in A tier. But if you're looking to make Elektra more useful, I recommend giving her striking upgrades at every turn. This will increase her melee damage output, thus increasing the rate at which she gets her extreme. Elektra's extreme stuns all enemies around her, so this playstyle would be greatly beneficial on top of her already helpful boost. Captain America is a striking character with 4 good outfits, 4 good powers, a stylish takedown, and a good extreme. Cap is my favorite character and in my opinion the best character to run solo. He's another hybrid character, a brawler capable of zoning. His close quarter shield attacks do great damage and his shield throw power knocks down any grunts it hits. His shield charge power allows him to breeze through enemy forces without the annoying tackle animation added onto certain other characters' charge attacks. Captain America is the full package. Iron Man is a body character with 3 viable outfits, 3 good powers, an okay takedown, and an okay extreme. Iron Man is the best suited for zoning with his Unibeam power, which is clearly misnamed, but has a boost that makes him one of the best support characters in the whole game. Iron Man's energy reroute boost decreases the energy cost for all teammates' powers. This boost makes certain characters who were not viable because of their low focus stat much more powerful. Iron Man and Moon Knight are just one example of such a killer combo. Spider-Man is a body character with 3 good outfits, 3 viable powers, an incredibly useful takedown, and an extreme that magnifies the scope of his takedown. Spider-Man is an entry-level zoner with not much going for him in terms of raw power. Where Spidey shines is his ability to web enemies to the ceiling, neutralizing them as threats for a time. His takedown does this to one enemy at a time, but his extreme immobilizes all enemies around him, and I believe it lasts longer. Owed to this, Spider-Man is one of, if not the best support character in the game. Iceman is a focus character with 4 viable outfits, 4 good powers, a pointless takedown, and a good extreme. Iceman is effectively a better Human Torch. He should primarily be used for zoning, but is also capable of raining down ice shards on enemies and knocking them aside with his ice sled charge. Mr. Fantastic is a body character with 4 viable outfits, 5 viable powers, a great takedown, and an okay extreme. What's great about Mr. Fantastic is how versatile he is and how fun his animations are. Just about any playstyle is viable with this character. His propeller arm and pinball powers knock down enemies on contact, and he's capable of doing decent radial damage. If you want to use him strictly for his long-range melee attacks, then I'd recommend increasing his striking stat. But regardless of his lack of melee power, Mr. Fantastic's takedown deals melee damage to multiple enemies near him and looks damn cool. Now then, finally, we come to S tier. This is the God tier. These characters are the best in all of Ultimate Alliance, whether you're running them solo or on a team. Those of you more familiar with the game will notice that I've so far left 2 characters out of the list, and that's because they are so good they deserve a tier all unto their own. Ultimate Alliance's God tier characters are Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool is a body character with 3 good outfits, 4 good powers, a sweet takedown, and a good extreme. Deadpool is the best zoner Ultimate Alliance has to offer. Deadpool's dual gunshot power is the best ranged attack in the whole game. Equip his assassin outfit for maximum efficiency. Combine his gunshots with Iron Man's energy reroute and you never have to stop firing. Deadpool also has access to the same spinning blade attack as Nightcrawler and Black Panther. His grenade toss does area of effect damage, but the real kicker is his boost. Deadpool, on top of his healing factor, ability to teleport, and gunshots, can buff the whole team's damage output with Battle Cry. Deadpool is the best there is at zoning and boosting, making him a must-have in your composition. But the best there is at raw damage output, he is not. Wolverine is a striking character with 3 viable outfits, an amazing passive trait, an okay takedown, and a good extreme. The only one of Wolverine's powers really worth using is his fury damage and speed buff. That is, until Rage kicks in. You see, Wolverine is the only character whose moveset changes when he enters Rage mode. Rage is charged by dealing out damage and only lasts a few seconds. But while Rage is active, whatever powers you have equipped transform and have different animations and effects, the best of which is his first unlocked power. During Rage, Wolverine's Claw Slash becomes Claw Frenzy, effectively turning Wolverine into Sabretooth. To maximize Wolverine's damage, pick up striking upgrades wherever you can, max out his Fury buff and activate it as often as possible, and wear his classic outfit. One might think that it would be more beneficial to wear Wolverine's ultimate costume because it increases the amount of time he spends in Rage mode. But his classic outfit increases all damage done by claw attacks, meaning literally all of his attacks. Wearing his classic outfit makes spamming X ever more viable, and considering the Claw Frenzy drains energy as you use it, you might have no other option than to spam X at some points. Wolverine is a contender for the title of best solo character. He has incredible damage potential and a healing factor, so there's little downside to running him with no teammates. But I'd still say Captain America is the best solo character, mostly because Wolverine doesn't have any zoning capabilities. But nevertheless, Wolverine and Deadpool are Ultimate Alliance's resident god tier characters. Now I'd like to have some more fun with the composition meta. I mentioned earlier that the worst team in the game would be comprised of Ms. Marvel, Doom, Blade, and Spider-Woman, and I stand by that. But what would be the best possible team in the game? What is Ultimate Alliance's God Squad? Some people would argue that the best team is dictated by the tactical advantage that the characters would give you in any given situation. But, and I'm just being honest here, Ultimate Alliance is not that complicated. I've had a lot of experience with this game, enough to say that the most viable playstyle is the one that guarantees the player the most damage in the shortest time possible. Therefore, the best team would be the one that could dish out the most punishment in the most efficient way. I've read and heard that some players value healing abilities or tank characters or characters with specific elemental resistances, but Ultimate Alliance is just not that complex. I love this game, but I wouldn't argue that it's a masterpiece of game design. The game isn't so deep that you need to take into account a multiplicity of factors. If your team can hit hard and fast, then they'll be effective 99% of the time. The only instance I can think of where raw damage isn't effective is the boss fight against Ulik, because he's immune to physical and energy damage. But then again, the only way to beat him is to deal elemental damage, so having a composition of high damage characters plus Thor or Storm would end up winning you the fight anyway. So what is Ultimate Alliance's best team? Iron Man, Deadpool, Elektra. This is Ultimate Alliance's God Squad. Iron Man for his energy reroute boost, Deadpool for battle cry and gunshots, and Elektra for intercom. But wait, only 3 characters? What about Wolverine or Silver Surfer? Daredevil has a damage buff too. Yes, Daredevil has a damage buff significantly less potent than Deadpool's or Elektra's. Wolverine is an S tier character but not really a team player, hence him not being part of the God Squad. As for Silver Surfer, you could include him in the God Squad, but he just wouldn't be necessary if you're using the team to their full potential. In fact, you could include anyone in the 4th spot of the God Squad, and the sheer amount of boosts active at any given time would make them far more powerful. Personally, I include Captain America or Wolverine in the team most often just because I enjoy playing them so much. The choice is yours. Okay, well, those are the best and worst teams, but what if you wanted to complete the story as fast as possible? An Ultimate Alliance speedrun team? I've got you covered. Deadpool, Mr. Fantastic, Captain America, and Iceman. For the most part, you could choose to avoid combat, so Mr. Fantastic's pinball power and Cap's shield charge would allow you to cruise straight through the story mode. For the instances when their energy meter runs dry, Iceman's ice sled can complete the rest of the journey, albeit slightly slower. There are specific cases in the story mode when you can totally skip puzzles and fights and just teleport past whatever's in your way. I recommend Deadpool over Nightcrawler for his battlecry boost. This team is easily the fastest moving in the game and still capable of dealing decent damage. Well, that's it guys. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry this tier list took so long to make, but I really wanted to make it a quality video. Because I love Ultimate Alliance so much, I'll probably upload more of it in the future, but I'd like to focus on MK11 when it releases. I really hope you enjoyed my Ultimate Alliance tier list. I put a ton of effort into the research for it. And as always, I love discussion and debate, so if you have any criticism of my tier list, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, see you next time.